time. I like to what I call car rot a lot, meaning that when I get home, sometimes I'll just sit in the car for like 15 minutes before
Okay.
I go in.
I love
And
that.
yes, like, because I know once I go in, it's like, okay, I'm going to jump on the computer. I got to respond to emails. I got to throw some laundry in. I got to do this. But I will literally just stay in my car and just allow myself that time.
Well,
Because
thank you for joining us today at Mommy Consults. I am Michelle Kay. I'm a licensed therapist and a mommy wellness coach. And I am so happy to have our guest today, Amy Timer. She's a licensed mental health counselor here in Florida. And she's been a counselor for 18 years. She does a lot of individual work, but also some group coaching work, working with neurodivergent moms, neurodivergent women, and she also has a podcast too as well. So she provides so much support. I really want her to come on and talk about what wellness really means for our neurodivergent moms, because that's really important to kind of think about wellness and what it means. So thank you, Amy, for joining.
yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to be here.
Good. So, what I usually like to do is start off with kind of like a visualization exercise with my guests. So, how does that sound?
Yeah, love it.
Okay. All right. So, you can just go ahead. You're just going to put kind of your hand on your heart, or you can put it anywhere where you feel like you're just going to be more grounded, more centered. And we're going to take a deep breath in and a breath out. Again, deep breath in and breath out. Again, one more deep breath in and out. And I want you for a moment, just have your breath back at a normal pace. And I want you to just for a moment put the word wellness in your mind. Just keep that word wellness in your mind. And notice what images start to pop up for you in your mind. Continue to repeat wellness. And just notice the images that pop up for you. Keep those images in your mind, and we're going to take a deep breath in and a breath out. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Yeah. Well, how is that for you?
Very nice, actually. I think sometimes as moms, we forget to just pause, right? And kind of ground ourselves and breathe. So I think that's just a great reminder, and definitely something with my wellness that I try to incorporate is those like mindfulness moments.
Yeah. Well, did anything come up for you? Any sort of visualization come up for you?
Yeah. When I think of wellness, I think mind, body, and soul. So my happy place is typically like just being outside in nature, really being in the elements, being present, being grounded. So I imagine myself out on my yoga mat in our garden with some like butterflies flying around and the sun beaming on me, and just taking some deep breaths and just really caring for myself, my mind, body, and soul, moving my body, having some affirmations that I'm practicing, and then just really filling my soul with being in the moment and nature.
I love that. Oh, I love that. Well, I mean, I think I would love to hear your journey, to wellness, or your journey as a mom, kind of sharing how did you move to kind of working with neurodivergent moms? And, what is your journey like?
Yeah. And I think up until becoming a mom, you can manage your wellness and try to prioritize that. But when you have children, that can be more of a challenge to find time and energy to incorporate. So it definitely is an important topic. For me, when we started wanting to build a family, we went through a lot of challenges in the perinatal process with some fertility struggles and losses and perinatal trauma. So, definitely was a hardship. And then finally becoming a mom and having my two girls was so amazing and rewarding. At the same time, it also became really overwhelming, right? To kind of now adjust to this new life and not have the same control over my environment or my life or my schedule. And so I realized how important it is for moms to be able to have that self care and incorporate that wellness so that we can show up for our kids and our family. But we first have to show up for ourselves. So that became really obvious. And then part of my story that I share a lot about is I'm late diagnosed ADHD.
Okay.
So within a few years of motherhood, having two girls and feeling kind of the overwhelm and overstimulation, I noticed something was going on. Like everything became so much harder and more overwhelming. And it was beyond just like typical anxiety or postpartum depression. And
Mhm.
so learned that I had ADHD, and that also ignited this new passion of supporting neurodivergent moms and women, especially women that were late diagnosed and are trying to now understand themselves and how to care for their symptoms.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that came up when I talk to moms is especially the word neurodivergent.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a newer word that has come into our therapy space. And so
Mhm.
do you have moms that are only diagnosed as ADHD, or are there other diagnoses that you're finding? So what are you noticing?
Yeah, and the word neurodivergent, I mean, simply just means that your brain works differently. When you talk about neurodiversity, your brain works differently than a neurotypical brain. So that can mean a lot of things. There's a lot of things under that umbrella. Now,
Mhm.
generally, it is used to describe someone that has ADHD or autism or ADHD,
Mhm.
but it also can be trauma, anxiety, depression, OCD, mood disorders. There's a lot of things that can fall under that, postpartum anxiety and depression. So, neurodivergence can mean that your brain just is processing information differently or functioning differently.
Mhm.
But what we're finding is a lot of these women or moms that we thought maybe just had some anxiety and depression actually, truly do have something like ADHD or autism, and they were taught to mask the symptoms or compensate for
Mhm.
them by becoming like people pleasers, high achievers, good girls.
Yep.
And you would never, think that a lot of these women, because they're high performers and appear very successful, have these traits or challenges. But then when you become a mom, it's like you can't hold it all together anymore and you start to see those cracks, right? And that's what happened to me. I think most people that knew me professionally were just shocked. Like, there's no way. Like, you're so organized and successful and put together, and there's no way that you can have this. But I think the more of the load and responsibility that you take on as a mom, the more you see those things come out.
Yeah. I think you brought up a really great point about, I think there's some times where people are almost like, and I don't think they intentionally do it, but they're like denying the diagnosis. So they meet you or they've known you, and then you're like, yes, I have ADHD. And then they're like, no, you don't. like,
Yes.
like you're not the poster, representation for ADHD. And so I think that's important. It's like, how, what do we do? What do you do when you have that mom friend who starts to say, hey, I went to get myself tested and I have ADHD, or I think that I have ADHD, or I think I have autism. I think it's a great conversation to think of, like, what does that mom friend say, or that mom family member, say.
Yes, I think the validation is so important. Unfortunately, there still are a lot of stigmas with these diagnoses, and you do receive some of these comments like, no, you don't, or everyone has that, or that's not real. And that can be really hurtful, right? Because this is a true neurological disorder. Like you can
Mhm.
look at brain scans and see like this is like a real thing,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't acknowledge it or they just kind of brush over it. So I think to be able to say, wow, tell me more about that. I want to understand, what that means and how that impacts you and how you show up in your life and how I can support you. That can mean everything to someone that's newly diagnosed trying to navigate it.
Yeah. And so it's good that we're able to, if someone's listening, they're learning about how they can support that neurodivergent mom. But also let's look at like, so what do we tell that neurodivergent mom when she starts to hear those comments? And, what advice do you usually give to that mom to help her navigate those comments or navigate her own wellness?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's really important to gain awareness and education about your diagnosis and what
Mhm.
that means to get professional support, whether that's therapy, coaching, doing some type of group work,
Yeah.
to have support from people that understand your diagnosis and that can help you work through that and make sure that you are incorporating your own wellness plan into your life so that you can care for yourself and your
Mhm.
symptoms. And you may have to make some accommodations or adjustments based on that because being neurodivergent or having something like ADHD does make you more vulnerable to things like burnout and
Okay.
overwhelm and overstimulation. So you have to really be intentional with caring for yourself and planning ahead so you don't fall into that.
Yeah. What's a tip or something that you've discussed even in some of your groups or with clients of what to do to help prevent that burnout?
Yeah, I think recognizing your capacity, is important. Being able to kind of daily check in with yourself, maybe utilize some type of journaling to really know where you're at and how you're feeling and to know like signs of burnout, right? Are you
Mhm.
starting to feel disconnected, unmotivated? Is it harder for you to get out of bed? Are you dreading your day? Are things starting to feel really overwhelming? Are you getting more irritable or having more like anger outbursts? So everyone may have different warning signs, but getting familiar with your warning signs, recognizing when you're getting close to that capacity, and being able to ask for help and support, say no to things, opt out of things so you don't overload yourself, and then preventative self care. And I talk a lot about that, doing things daily to recharge and make sure that you have those outlets.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many things in there. So making sure that you kind of have a plan for yourself, which is important. One of the things I've noticed is just throughout seeing like social media within, not only within like when we think of like our therapy, our therapeutic industry, is we are now seeing this like influx of reels, the conversation that we're having. We're seeing so much more education, information, visuals as well about neurodivergent moms or about moms. And so, what are you seeing, throughout social media in terms of how, the images of neurodivergent moms?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually, for the most part, it's a good thing that
Mhm.
there are more moms and women talking about it, normalizing it, raising awareness and education, so that maybe a mom that is undiagnosed can
Mhm.
start to understand what's going on and get support and get access to the right resources. So, for the most part, I think that it's
Sorry.
a great thing to kind of have that awareness out there because you might be on social media and be like, well, wait, like that sounds a lot like me, or I can relate to that. I thought I was the only mom that felt like that, but realizing, no, this is like a real thing. And there's other moms that are going through this. You're not alone.
Yeah. Well, I know that you are on social media. And do you feel sometimes, do you get feedback or messages from people who ever reach out to you and say like, wow, like I identify with something that you posted. I'm just curious.
Yeah, all the time. When I actually came out and shared my diagnosis story about a year and a half ago, so many people started to message me. A lot of like my mom friends, people in my life, people that I've known for years are like, oh my gosh, this is me. Like, I relate so much to what you're saying. I had no idea. And I felt the same way. I mean, again, being in the mental health field for 18 years, we went to grad school, I think, around the same time. Like, this was nothing that was ever discussed as far as neurodivergence and how ADHD shows up in girls and women. There's not a lot of research. The DSM was based on research of 7-year-old boys. I'm not a 7-year-old boy. And what we've learned is hyperactivity, especially for women, is internalized. So it looks like chronic anxiety, rumination, overanalyzing. So a lot of women have been thinking they have anxiety. They've maybe tried treatment and nothing's really helping, and they feel just kind of defeated and lost. So I
Mhm.
think getting those messages and raising that awareness has really helped a lot of other women and moms go to their doctor, go to their psychiatrist, go to their therapist and say, can we investigate this? Can we talk about this? Because I relate a lot to what I saw here.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the best thing is to be able to go to a provider, a therapist, a coach, to be able to, have someone understand you and
Mhm.
also to maybe someone to provide that diagnosis. I think that, like you said, like that validation is important because you're like, oh, wow, now I'm realizing this is exactly why I've been feeling this way for so long.
Absolutely. It can be very liberating to finally understand yourself.
Yeah. Um, well, I think I always want to just think about the different hats that you just wear personally. I know you're a mom, but how do you kind of navigate your different hats that you're doing? I know you're a therapist, you're doing coaching. So, how do you navigate all of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? So many like transitions throughout the day, and transitions are hard, especially
Mhm.
when you have ADHD. So I'm a mom, like you said, I'm a therapist, a coach, an entrepreneur, running two businesses. I'm a wife, so I have a marriage I'm trying to work on and maintain all the time because, as we know, every relationship takes effort. I have friendships, family. There's just so much, I think that we're always trying to balance while also taking care of ourselves.
Mhm.
So I think time blocking can be really helpful. I know we talked about that a little bit, kind of being able to start the day with some self-care time. Then maybe you have a couple hours where you're wrangling the kiddos and getting them off to school. So that's kind of like mom mode.
Yeah.
And then having maybe some transition time before you start your work or you start to jump into your businesses. And then before you enter mom mode again, having another transition,
Mhm.
and some source of self care before family time. So, planning those transitions, kind of blocking out your day with all those different like roles or identities, and making sure that you do have that time to recharge, because sometimes I think we're just jumping from one task to another or one role to another. And I know for me, like if I don't get that decompression time, if I'm like dropping the kids off, I have to rush home, jump on a call, then go pick up the kids, rush home, make
Mhm.
dinner, and then I didn't have just a moment to kind of
Yeah.
breathe and check in with myself, I get really dysregulated.
Yeah, I really love that. So I'm thinking of transition time is not something that our society like really values sometimes.
Mhm.
Like, and I even think about with our little ones, like, sometimes I've worked in schools and they're like, okay, let's go to the next thing. We're going to go do math now. We're going to go do this now. And there's no like calm moment in
Mhm.
between. So it's kind of like, I think that's such a new concept of thinking of before you go into a new role as a mom or at work is to have a transition.
Mhm.
What do we tell our moms who've just been used to that probably their whole life of like, hey, we just go to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. What would you tell a mom, to kind of help them go through those transitions and build that into their day?
Yeah, you have to get used to it and create a habit. But some things that I do is I actually will put it on my calendar. So, like after I drop off the kids, transition time, and I'll block it off or have an alarm that goes off, like, transition time or mindful moment, because sometimes it is hard to remember. We're just so fixated on what's next, especially as moms.
Yeah.
So utilizing any free time you have, even just the commute, right? Like the commute from dropping my kids off to coming back home to start work, really being intentional with that. Maybe I'm playing music, maybe I'm listening to affirmations or a podcast, but utilizing that time. I like to what I call car rot a lot,
Okay.
meaning that when I get home, sometimes I'll just sit in the car for like 15 minutes before
Okay.
I jump in.
I love
And
that.
yes, like, because I know once I go in, it's like, okay, I'm going to jump on the computer. I got to respond to emails. I got to throw some laundry in. I got to do this. But I will literally just stay in my car and just allow myself that time, because it's hard for me once I'm in the house. And I'm sure you can relate to
Yeah.
pause, because there's so many distractions and so many things I feel like I have to do or I'm obligated to do. So I take advantage of my car sometimes and just give myself a few minutes to just decompress. It's like my safe little bubble. No one can get me, no one can access me. And I'll do that in a parking lot or in my driveway. So utilizing that time, getting creative with how you can give yourself that transition time.
Yeah, I love that. I know I was sharing with you earlier that we now moved to like having my little one go on the bus. And that's like now my transition time because I'm gaining like an almost like an hour from the commute time. And so I'm like taking a nap or like resting and I'm like, this is golden. Like this is like so I love that. So whether it is if it's an hour, if it's 5 minutes, like you said, 15 minutes, just taking that time and building that into your schedule with like a calendar reminder is really important. So
Mhm.
I love that tip. Well, you provided so many great tips, strategies, and even your story, I think, is so inspiring for a lot of our moms. Can you tell everyone like where we can find you online and everything, and what if you're offering anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is amytimercounseling.com, and you can access all my therapy services and coaching and groups there. And I also am on Instagram, just at Amy Timer, and I post a lot of content regarding like motherhood and neurodivergence and self-care, all these things that we're talking about. I also recently just launched a podcast with my bestie. We both are moms with ADHD, so we just talk a lot about this stuff too and share our story and our journey. And our goal is to create like a community of other women and moms with ADHD or neurodivergence so they can feel supported.
I love that. And the links are going to be below so you can all access that. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining us. And I hope you take care for the rest of your day.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.